already.
Yes, you're very welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown. Enda call here with you alongside Alan Morrison, aka Celtic by Numbers, and by Joko James as well. Guys, midweek game, another win for Celtic. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't a 4-0 win. It wasn't a derby win, but it is 3 points nonetheless. Celtic are now 20 games unbeaten, 18 wins from those 20 games, and all wins since the winter break as well. So mighty form from Ange Postecoglou's side, it has to be said. Let's start with the Aberdeen win. 3-2 was the final score. Second half, not great. 2 goals conceded from set pieces, 2 set plays from Aberdeen. And Jota pulls off a winning goal to drag it out and get the 3 points that Celtic need to stay top of the table. So, Alan, I'll come to you first. Not all wins have to be pretty. Not all wins have to be blowouts. And sometimes these wins that you drag from the depth actually end up being more important to squad confidence and belief than the ones where you blow Motherwell out of it.
Yeah, even in Scotland, where as we've said before, the disparity between the top teams and the others is significant. But bear in mind, those teams are used to playing teams like Celtic, right? So they actually are comfortable playing a team of Celtic's level. When Celtic come up above, like a team like Bayern Munich, for example, it's still a bit of a shock, right? Because it's a huge gulf. But these teams, they do play Celtic a lot because of the nature of the competition and playing 4 times a season and so forth. So the point being is that as we see, and as many players have found out coming up to Scotland, it's not as easy a league. You can't just turn up and like you say, win 4 goals every week. So league titles are built on all sorts of different ways to win. And, yesterday was definitely a different way to win. To be so utterly and completely in control against a team that's set up as if they'd never watched Celtic play against Motherwell on the previous game, and then to completely change the way that they play and become incredibly effective, and really scare Celtic at the end. But then to nick it anyway, but then do what Celtic have done. This is if you want to take one commonality from it, it's the fact that having got ahead once again in the game, Celtic saw the match out with relatively little drama. And I do think there's something in that, in terms of that. As much as we and I think we'll go on to talk about the way Celtic play, the sheer physical effort that entails, the impact on fitness and the game state. I do think it was becoming apparent to me is it's having a big impact on the opposition, and again, there are a couple of trends that we'll talk about around when goals are scored, both by Celtic, mainly against Celtic, that show that actually, that we've got the stickability. It's just I think we just need to recalibrate a little bit when we freshen the 11 up, and I think we're in good shape because, as you said, in that run, I keep going back to the beginning of the season and it's like that away that I was thinking about the Aberdeen game when we won 2-1 away, and that was like the first really notable win that Postecoglou got away from home. But it took until September. We'd had a run of away defeats. We'd lost away games in Europe. We'd lost a lot of games at that point. So to go on this run, and you think the team is only going to get stronger from here. The players are getting stronger every day. The likes of Hatate, Maeda are getting stronger. O'Reilly's getting stronger. New players are coming back. The partnerships are improving. So the team's only getting stronger as we go into this latter part of the season. And yes, you're going to have to battle and fight and scratch on a windy night in Aberdeen to get points occasionally. But I think much as there are some concerns and nuance we need to talk about, and we will get to, we've got to be very positive about that.
Yeah, a couple of massive wins on that run that were really pulled out of it in the end, where Celtic didn't exactly play fantastically, but they got the win. Ralston's last-minute header springs to mind. Abada's goal against Dundee United just a week ago. These are important wins and important types of wins that really does build a belief within the squad that they are not unbeatable, but that they have confidence that they can see out games and win these games, even if they don't play at 100%. And James, you might be able to provide better data than the FOTMOB data that I had at hand after the game and the reaction. But Aberdeen finished the game with an XG of around 0.73, which was what FOTMOD had for the game. So even though they scored 2 goals, those 2 goals were isolated incidents within the game, and Aberdeen didn't really lay a hand on Celtic apart from that.
Not much from open play, and that's I put out a little thing before the game on Twitter. That's been the MO for Aberdeen this season. Is they've been quite poor from open play. Actually, in the stats bomb data, they've been pretty comparable to Ross County in that regard. Now, again, for their size of club that Ross County they've actually been pretty good in attack this season, relatively speaking. And these things are all relative, but that gives you an idea. I mean, the wage bill disparity between Ross County and Aberdeen is quite significant. So where Aberdeen have been pretty good is on set pieces, and we saw that. Ramirez is a decent finisher in that kind of 12 yards and in area, and I've watched them quite a bit this season, and them having a good play on, shall we say. I think one of their European games, they might have even ran that exact same play over the summer. Basically where they set screens, it's, again, a basketball analogy. It's like setting a pick or a screen. I think Brown was the screener. And then, creating a channel for the guy to receive the ball. So, it was pretty much standard fare as far as I'm concerned, as far as a game that we were probably, on another day, some bad variance, as we always say, could have resulted in a draw. We had a vintage Scottish referee performance where everyone comes out thinking they got screwed on both teams.
That's Willie. That is Willie Collum. Willie Collum is unique in that regard.
Exactly. Yeah. So he I think it's like a Jackson Pollock painting from a refereeing perspective. When he does games, it's you can always see something
viewed through the prism of vodka.
Right. Exactly. So, it's just a mess. And so if that happened to have flipped a little bit against us, we were fortunate. O'Reilly's goal was on a deflected ball. And for one of the instances, their keeper was actually well positioned had it not been deflected. Whereas in the first goal, he was, pretty pathetic on. So, it was one of those games where you could have easily seen a draw. I thrilled that we didn't, that we got out of it. Won the game. We chatted a little bit before we went live here, and it's like these are the kind of games that, out of 38 league games, you're not going to have 38 games where you blow people out and look great for 2 full halves. So, we'll take it. We just started talking about this a couple of weeks ago. We've been due for this kind of run where some of these kinds of games turn in our direction, and now we're getting a string of them. And long may it continue at least through May.
Yeah, it's not like we're at the wrong end of chances created, XG, that sort of thing. Celtic we're well ahead on all those kind of attacking measures. But like you said, James, that's now like 3-4 long range shots that have gone in the last few games.
Exactly.
The O'Reilly one in particular, beautifully deflected into the opposite corner to where the goalkeeper was going. So yeah, you said, listen, I don't feel guilty about it. These are the things that have not been going our way for 18 months prior to that. And again, I don't expect any sympathy. Celtic lorded it for 9 years before that, so no sympathy required. But those are the facts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a number of reasons this was an important win, mainly being the fact that it's the last league game now for, I think it's the 27th of February is the next league game that Celtic have. They've got the Wraith Rovers Cup game this weekend and then Bodo Glimt during the week. And it was just important just to see out that league form and sort of go into these cup games now without the pressure of having to consistently win these games in order to stay top of the table. I think it will be a bit of a pressure reliever for the side. In terms of the positivity side of the game, look, it wasn't a stellar Celtic performance in any aspect, but I guess if you're going to pick someone out again, Matt O'Reilly is the man that you would pick out because of the obvious goal and assist that he gets first goal for Celtic as well. James, since he's come in, again, he just seems like another Rogic. Like it almost seems as if Tom Rogic was starting that game in another form, in the form of a young, handsome Englishman as opposed to an Australian.
You know, it's funny. We did not coordinate this, but I actually I wrote a column that I found out. I wrote it 2 days ago, so it was before yesterday's game. It's not going to get published until Sunday. So I've just dove into this topic. You know, kind of looking at O'Reilly, obviously with limited data at Celtic, but also I had done a profile on him on Twitter when we signed him, looking at his time at MK Dons, and comparing kind of performance metrics over both of those periods relative to Rogic this season, because I think a lot of people would agree Rogic has been really, really good this season, particularly given expectations of him. I'll throw my hand up, you know, being skeptical that he could play the role effectively as an attacking 8 in Ange's system for a significant period of time. And what O'Reilly has done so far, and again, small sample, it's a good bit above a Rogic level. And I say that because he's also doing it in defensive and pressing metrics. So we've talked about in prior episodes how Rogic has done yeoman's work. And again, just tremendous credit to him for taking this on, because that was probably one of the criticisms that most people had, was his off the ball work and some of his intensity of work in prior seasons defensively. And he's been putting the effort in and the shifts in. He's just not that effective at doing it. And O'Reilly seems to have an orders of magnitude more effectiveness component in that side of that phase of the game. On top of that, he's offering the kind of creative ball progression and passing like we saw with the cross yesterday. But that's not I mean, he's been doing this. He's cranking these things out every game, almost in an obscene amount of consistency. So again, it's only 4+ games. Long may it continue. Hopefully this is reflective. I mean, it's almost absurd to think he could keep this up at this rate, but you know, he's done it against Rangers. He's done it against Hearts. So it's not like he's been doing this against 10 men Dundee or anything where he's rolling up stats off of, you know, impaired low-level competition. So, yeah, I've been incredibly impressed. And to me, he's the standout right now as far, you know, people talk about, well, who do you not start when everyone's fit? To me, he's number one on, because that ability to create chances for other people with that kind of vision, throw in on top of that the defensive work rate and effectiveness. I mean, that's, to me, is like a first class kind of player that's not all that easy to obtain and to keep. So you should play him when you have him.
Yeah, especially for the price tag of £1.5 million, which is just obscene if he continues on this form. I'm on the record as saying that Tom Rogic is my favorite Celtic player, and I stand by that still. But I do think O'Reilly is more versatile in terms of the. Is
Liam aware of this? Is Liam aware of this?
He's my favorite Irish Celtic player.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but in terms of O'Reilly, his versatility is wider than I think Tom Rogic's is in terms of ability to drop into the number 8 position, which is an important aspect to have for a creative player. He also has this weird thing. I'm not sure if anybody else has spotted it. The tackle style that he has, where he's behind his man and he sort of wraps his leg around in a back heel sort of motion. He's incredibly effective with that. I don't know if that's something that is in his game, Alan. You're nodding your head. You've noticed it as well, have you?
Yeah, I'm glad we're all catching up with this, because I think I said last week he'd be the first name on my team sheet already, which is I know that was flush from euphoria of a Derby win, but I meant it. I wouldn't have said it if I hadn't meant it. And like I said last week, he's got this incredible ability to win the ball back without actually tackling anyone. In the sense of, we think of a tackle as being like a fairly aggressive, full-blooded kind of physical activity. He nicks the ball from people because he's so quick at seeing, and he sees, you know, or the player's not quite balanced, or the ball's just available now, and he's quick enough then to get his body in. So he wins a lot of unseen balls. You think he's not done anything during the game defensively, and then you look back and you look at the defensive actions, you think, oh, that was quite a lot. Crikey, how did that happen? I can't remember which game it was. It might have been the Hearts game. He won something like 5 tackles in the second half, which is incredible for a number 8, really. So that, definitely got that in his game. It's not by any means the part of his game, but it's a nice bonus that I didn't expect. I mean, I just love. I mean, even more. I was watching him last night. I didn't realize that. He's got. I talked about Dalglish the first time I saw him, and I wasn't joking. And I don't mean in terms of ability. I just mean in terms of his physical movement. He's got that slightly hunched way about him. The way his arms move, and he kind of prowls across the pitch. It's the same. He's got the same physical movement as Dalglish. And what I realised last night, he's got the same bloody big arse as well. he's got this big bum that he can stick out into people. That Dalglish was
a very important
for.
Aspect of modern football.
Absolutely. Really so I nearly managed to get my inner Al Pacino there. Big ass. It's got, that's what scared the children there. For those of you on YouTube. So absolutely love him, and the Dalglish comparison in terms of physical movement is just making him undroppable in my eyes.
Yeah. Jota is another player that had quite a good game, but I think we'll come back to him just a sec, because I want to talk about Abada last night. He, I think, struggled for parts of the game, and I think that was more down to the Aberdeen game plan rather than Abada actually playing all that poorly. They doubled up, tripled up at times every time they got the ball, singled them out, and forced them into dribbles, James. It seemed like this was a game plan from Aberdeen. It worked effectively and potentially could be something for Celtic to look at when it comes to Abada. Maybe it was the fact that Juranovic wasn't playing on the right wing, so you didn't have the exact same sort of movement that he provides with Tony Ralston playing there instead. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's a reasonable idea, meaning that I think Juranovic offers something different than Ralston, especially on the ball, and that kind of link up play and the speed with which he's able to link up in his movement and the runs he makes. So it does appear, and again, this is qualitative. I don't really have anything quantitative to add to it, but qualitatively, it seems like that side operates a little bit more smoothly with Juranovic recently, as we've kind of come out of the winter break. And we had presumably they had time to work on these things, as Alan has rightly pointed out. Coming out of breaks, we've been excellent, and so I think that's part of it. But there's also part of that where Abada is such a quixotic player, because he's so good in certain components of the game, particularly those runs into the box. He puts good balls in. And when he does, they're really good. But then, 70% of the time when they're bad, they're awful. You know what I mean? So he's such a player of extremes. And one of the things that's relatively extreme is he's just not good at beating opposing players of any decent level off the dribble. He's actually, I have it here. He's, let me see, his attacking. Yeah, so he's actually he only won 1 out of 5 dribbles yesterday.
Yeah, he was up against Johnny Hayes, right? Who's probably the quickest left back he's going to face all season.
Yeah, so he struggled, and we talked about that. Even before he only played a half, but Jota didn't have a great game in that component of the game either, because Ramsey's decent in that phase of play, and McCrory was pretty good and physical in the second half when he shifted over. Jota did a lot of other things that were obviously pretty valuable in the game, but it wasn't that he was taking guys on one-on-one like he has in the past and just dominated. And that just is not a strength, it appears, of Abada, and that was evident in his data from Israel too. So when he's on the ball, trying to carry, if he has someone he's got to beat, like he's great at getting behind and making that run and receiving the ball like one touch bang or crossing it bang, right? But he's not someone that seems to be all that productive as far as being part of like intricate triangles, ticky-tack type play in the final third against a bunkered team like a Livingston. So he's just really fascinating. Analytically, he's fascinating because he does offer so much value relative to goals and chance creation for teammates. But the other parts of his game are, not only not great, they're, borderline not good. So it's if he's not delivering the former in a game, which again, it's ridiculous to expect that to happen every single game. He's going to have variance in his performance levels, just game to game. And he's had a great run recently, and so he was kind of due for a game where the parts of what he does well didn't come off, and when that doesn't happen, you're left with the rest, which isn't all that appealing. And I think yesterday was more one of those games.
Loads of comments coming in on the YouTube, and keep them coming as well. But I want to touch on this one from Kevin14, who says that we don't play our wingers in a traditional way. And I actually watched a video today on Tifo Football, which is a YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, if you're interested in football, they do really good videos. And it was essentially about how our perception of football and our understanding of positional play is warped because of the way that we grew up with football being about certain players playing certain positions, and those certain positions being a certain type of player that plays in them and a certain type of role, and how all of that has changed now. And I guess that is what you talk about with Abada. So naturally, Abada plays on the right-hand side of a 4-3-3, so he's a right winger for Celtic, but he's not a right winger traditionally, what you would expect from a right winger. He doesn't provide you those dribbles that an Aidan McGeady would do. He doesn't beat men naturally, but he's very good at arriving late onto balls at the back post, and he's very good at getting into the right position inside the box. So I think the idea of him as a winger might be something that holds people back in terms of how well or otherwise they rate him as a player.
Yeah, well, yeah, and he's a classic anchoring and confirmation bias player, because depending on what your anchored view is on him, if you like him and that's your anchor, there's plenty of stuff that you're going to love that he does. And if you have a negative bias towards him, there's plenty of stuff he's going to do that's going to drive you absolutely nuts. So we see that also on the left when we've had Maeda play there, or even to a degree in the limited amount that Kyoko has played on the left. It's kind of an inside forward, almost like Sinclair played a bit under Rodgers, where they're in that populating that half space quite a bit. And we've been pulling out, this is where O'Reilly and even Rogic at times has been, and to his credit, Turnbull is quite good at this, is getting wide and kind of allowing that inside channel with the fullbacks and the wingers to invert, so to speak, get in that half space. So, it's this is always the issue with analysis: is how do you break down, how do you segment, what's an actual benchmark? I wouldn't want Abada playing as a classic winger, given some of the limitations in his game. I think he is well suited for more of this inverted or inside forward role, for all the reasons that we talked about. And I just have the number. He's 11th percentile in the league this season. So basically 90% of wingers in the league are better at dribble success rate. So this is what I'm saying. Like at a SPFL level, he's one of the worst wingers in the league, beating a man one-on-one.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't care less about that, and the reason the reason I say that is because dribbling is a relatively low volume activity. Players, compared to passing the ball, a player might complete 50 passes and like one or two dribbles, right? So the fact that he's in the lower part of that is to me irrelevant. If he's picking the right passes, if he's finding players in the box, if he's cutting the ball back to somebody, if he's playing an inside ball or playing an outside ball to an overlapping player, which he's very good at as well, that to me would give him massive utility. I mean, we talk about traditional wingers, but when were wingers last traditional? I mean, if you're as old as I am, a traditional winger means somebody who literally spends the whole game with their chalk on the boots, chalk on the boots, as he used to say, and bangs long high crosses into massive centre forward, right? Well, nowadays people that play nominally in wide positions are forwards, right? And they're multi-purpose forwards. Strikers aren't, Dixie Deans and Bob Latchford and people like that, right? They're multi-purpose mobile players that have a defensive role and a creative role and an attacking role, and the same with the wide players. They've got very different roles, and I don't think it's almost a theoretical position to say, we're moving to a state of having 11 footballers on the pitch and they're all basically multi-skilled to the same degree. I don't think that'll ever happen, but it is more like that than it used to be, where you had almost like rugby style. You play on the wing, therefore you can't be more than 5'6", and you got to be quick, and you got to be able to beat a man. Those days are long gone. So I'm not bothered about that. I'm bothered about is the attacking output, right? And if you think, and you say he's had a purple patch, 6 goals or assists in the last 3 games, over one's expected scoring contribution in each of the last 3 games. He's a young player. He's going to have dips. And last night, I think he was up against a pretty speedy opponent. So, he had a hard night.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why I bring it up. That's why I bring. Sorry, cut across you, James. But that's why I actually bring it up. And I don't think, James, you're saying that Abada is a bad player because
no, he's not. No, he's not.
Yeah,
I agree.
I'm highlighting it as why he's quixotic, meaning that for him to be, and he has been, he's been one of the highest valued players on Celtic this season in Europe and domestically. So this has not been some flash in the pan. But if you just nominally said that, one of our highest expenditure buys for a player of that profile, meaning that he was 19 when we bought him and we spent $4+ million on him, and he's a winger. And if you would say he would be amongst the worst players in the league in taking opponents on in dribble, that sounds wrong. You know what I mean? That it sounds odd that any Celtic winger would be amongst the worst in the league at an SPFL. Now, at Champions League, you could say, oh, well, okay, so that's standard. Maybe they would struggle at that level. So it's just so weird how valuable he has been and probably will continue to be with these just really interesting. And to me, it's not just dribble percentage. I think that's indicative of a technical issue, and you see that with some of his passing as well. I mean, that's why when things go wrong with him, they go so horribly wrong, is because there's just something technically going on there where he's maybe not as refined, and maybe never will be, but he's so good in these other ways that it more than makes up for it. So that was more so the point that I was making.
Yeah. It was more from a positive standpoint that I was sort of bringing this up, is that like, while the perception around Abada might be that he can't beat a man, he's not expected to beat men because that's not his job.
Yeah, he can't, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter that it doesn't matter that he can. Exactly. That's exactly the entire point that I meant to establish, and I ended up bringing this down a massive wormhole. Let's move across to the other wing, to Jota, who is, again, not a traditional winger in the ideas of a traditional winger. And more so, if you look at, he got 2 goals last night, which are obviously the most important aspects of his play. But for such a good player in terms of his attacking output, he had 6 ground duels that he won last night, 4 tackles, 4 fouls. He won 4 fouls, 2 interceptions. I mean, as well as being exceptional going forward and getting important goals, Jota does a lot of defensive work that's really good.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit underestimated, and dare I say, because of his pretty boy looks and his nice hair, people probably don't think that he actually rolls his sleeves up and gets on with it. So no, he is pretty good like that. I think as well, just a little bit of again, game state we need to talk about again, because here we are on a small pitch on a windy night against a big physical opponent. The ball's bouncing around a lot. They've got a lot of players who are not great technical, so the ball's bouncing off the big lumbering players that they have in the back there. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of fighting going on for loose balls and a lot of recoveries going on. So I expect most players' numbers to be elevated in that regard. But certainly across the piece, I would say Jota's probably defensively been a pleasant success. I mean, he does take people on. I mean, I was just going to say on Abada, I don't want to go back down that, but Abada's now is now third highest expected assists in the squad, but one of those is Ryan Christie. He's not there anymore. So that, the ball moves quicker than the man, right? So if you can pass the ball well, then that, to me, that's what I'd be looking at. But Jota's probably a bit different to that. He does carry the ball, and he's very effective at carrying the ball. But even if you remember a couple of times in the first half where he actually beat a player and got ahead, that's literally taking one player out of the game, and to beat a player is a lot of effort. It's a lot of physical effort. You're probably going to get hit. You've then got to keep your balance, and you've beaten one player. Whereas one pass can take out 4 or 5 opponents. So I'd always prefer a team to pass the ball. It's just more effective. It just makes more sense, basically. But you love to have someone like him who gives you a completely different set of problems to deal with, because he has got the ability. And even if you smack him, and even if he thinks you're fast, he's not going to stop trying. But he doesn't do it stupidly, like if you think about, I don't know, I suppose the classic in the modern game might be Adama Traore, right? He's just going to do it because that's all he can do. He's just going to knock the ball past it. He's going to try and run past you. And whether it works or whether it doesn't, he's going to do it again. And it's kind of dumb. And some of them will come off and it'll look amazing. But Jota's a clever player. And he picks his moments, and he doesn't, and he because of his output, we can see that he makes good choices. So he's different. We'll allow him to do it. He doesn't overdo it either. That's the other thing I would say. He doesn't overdo it. He uses it as a weapon, and he makes a decision. I'm going to take this player on because I see the space behind, not just because I can, not just because I'm the winger and that's what I'm expected to do. So I think his decision making in attacking areas is probably what sets him apart.
Yeah, he doesn't take the piss with it. And again, I'm going to bring up the name Aidan McGiddy, because I mean he's a classic example of a fella who took too much out of the game a lot of the time. I suppose one thing that you can say about the dribbles, and even just the threat of the dribbles from Jota, is that often at times people gravitate towards him, defenders gravitate towards him, because they think, okay, he's going to try to go past me here. We'll double up, we'll get him, and then suddenly he flicks it to Hatate. Hatate switches it across the field, and Celtic are free with half Aberdeen side across the other side of the pitch. So again, that's another threat that comes with even just the talent that that Jota has on the team.
Well, and I'll say, not all dribbles are created equal, obviously. So where he's able to add that value is he gets close to the opponent's box, and he's able to beat a one-on-one and then create space for either a shot or a cross, right? So it's those. Whereas if you beat a guy 50 yards from goal, nice, can be pretty at times, but to Alan's point, maybe a pass that takes out 3 lines of defenders is going to, increase the chance of scoring a goal. So, that's where I think kind of the leverage of his skill as he gets closer to the goal, and that ability to really take on men is really exceptional, and not only for creating chances for himself, but then being able to do so with teammates.
Alan, can I get a quick thought from you on Maeda? And we might do sort of an overarching look at all of the signings that Ange made in January once they have that magic number of minutes played. But it felt to me like he struggled against Aberdeen last night, didn't get involved to play much. And at times I was actually hoping that Giakoumakis would come on just to have a little bit more physicality and hold up play and link up play up front. So in general, what did you think didn't work for him, or what did you think did work for him last night?
Yeah, so again, I wrote a piece today which really dives into this whole concept of perception versus the moments that you remember, and therefore the perceptions that you take from that versus the actual performance, which can be made of many more parts than those small memories that you form from a game for any, because there's 22 players to watch at the end of the day. And actually, having said all that, my memory of him was 2 things. One, actually getting into decent positions, and then his finishing just seemed to was just poor. Just really, it was just like really pathetic, almost like really kind of weak. I mean, the header, he found himself free amongst 3 central defenders to get on the end of an amazing cross from Ralston. And I thought, well, given the YouTube videos I'd seen of his heading ability, I thought, wow, this is a really big chance for him. And it was kind of a weak header. And then he had a couple where he was through, and it was just a couple of weak finishes. But he got into good positions. And we've been saying this about Giakoumakis. He got into those positions. But I found myself, when I was watching the game, on at least 3 occasions, actually almost applauding as I'm watching it on my crappy stream, when he came back and was winning the ball off of people, is in his pressing. And again, one of the big weaknesses in my data is I don't record pressures, or there was one at the weekend, I think, when Rogic pressed the defender so hard he forced him to give the ball away in a bad position. I've got no mechanism to capture that at all. But that was the Rogic. That was a really quite important action that was missed on that one. And Maeda does that a lot. He forcing the goalkeeper to kick it quicker than he wanted to, forcing the defender to kick it before he's really set to kick it. It probably turns over possession, and then something happens on the back of that. So don't underestimate the power of that. Those things accumulate over a game. So I think there was some good bits. I think he got into good positions. I don't want to make excuses for him, but I think it's only fair to say that he's flown halfway around the world and back.
Yeah.
He's literally, as I keep saying with Hatate as well, he's probably coming to the end of what would be his pre-season. So I think we've got to give the guy a bit of time, and he's not played as many because he missed those games. So he's not played as many minutes for Celtic as Hatate has, and so this is like his second start, I think. Is it? No, third start, probably. Third start. 290 minutes, 74 minutes on his debut, 28 minutes he came on in the derby. So yeah, and he's still got 2 goals at the end of it. I think we're giving him a bit of time, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. And let's be frank about it. What Kyogo, Hatate, O'Reilly, Jota, and Abada have done in terms of new players coming into the team and being unbelievable from the very get-go, that's not a normal thing,
Well, I mean, you look at it, you think, yeah, you look at it, you think, you can tell. I don't know. You can't tell straight away, right? You've got to gather the data. I always say at 900 minutes, but there's players that you're kind of worried about. Are you going to be good after 900 minutes? And there's players you sort of think, I can't wait till you've done 900 minutes so I can tell people how good you are, right? And all those players going to fit into that sort of latter camp, whereas somebody like a Giakoumakis is still in that sort of, what are you going to be like? Not quite sure how it's going to turn out. But, and generally, if you look back over the last 20 years of Celtic transfer windows, you'd kind of be 50-50 as to which camp players fall into, if not a little bit, less than that. But I think we've got a bunch of players that are like, we can't wait to see the data, and then we've got a few that we're still like, not sure. And I think that's not. I know that's not very quantitative, sorry, but it's a pretty good return.
Yeah. It's like, we'll give him time. He's also coming from a completely different culture into Glasgow, halfway across the world, and not everyone takes to it like a duck to water like Hatate and Kyogo did immediately. So I will say that I am excited to see whether he progresses into the player that we think he will be, because if that's the case, then he will be a very good player as well. But we'll give him time to adapt to the league. One thing that's been a sort of a trend on this show, as well as a trend in Celtic's performance, it seems to be the second half display and what sort of performance Celtic put in. And again, on the face value, with the 2 goals conceded, the second half seems like a worse performance for Celtic because, they conceded 2 goals. But across the entire performance, I actually don't think the second half was all that worse than the first half. James, without dragging people through the whole idea of timings of substitutions and things like that, because, I mean, who knows why Ange makes these decisions. What is your working theory on why Celtic's performance drops when it comes to the second half?
Yeah, I think the obvious issue comes down to player fitness, substitution patterns, and the interplay of the demand of the style of play. So, we've, as Alan said, we've got a handful of players here. So we've had different reasons for the same outcome, right? So the first half of the season, we had no bench and we were flogging players to the point where they would fatigue, understandably, as they were getting flogged playing that style twice a week. And then we had this influx of talent. Again, some injuries that popped up that thinned the herd a little bit, but we've got now a deeper bench. But the kind of first choice players that have come in as upgrades or replacements or enhancements to that depth are all kind of in preseason, or even a guy like O'Reilly was not playing this way at MK Dons. So even though he was mid-season, and I don't know League One that well, I'm assuming they probably play similar to the Championship, meaning a ton of league games and twice a week a lot.
46.
Yeah. So he's probably more used to playing twice a week, but not playing in an Ange Postecoglou system. So the idea that Hatate, Maeda, and O'Reilly are just going to step in and be at peak fitness to be able to play 90 minutes above and beyond. You've got the international travel and all of these other potential issues that, to me, that's the kind of the Occam's razor. It's the fitness. It's that interplay of those different factors. And, hopefully it'll improve. You would think guys like Hatate and O'Reilly will build up fitness in particular. But again, from what I've heard and read, that these things don't happen right away, and it's going to take some time, just like it did for, let's say, a Rogic or a Turnbull in the first few months of the season, as they acclimate to the demands of playing this way. So, it could be well into March or April, and then we just have to manage this, as I think that, as Alan has pointed out, Ange has been managing it to a degree. I mean, in that, maybe not with substitutions the way that some of us would like to see, but tactically, who he is substituting, what he's trying to do as far as, he's not going out. I know he says certain things, but when you look at actions in a game that's a little bit tighter, like Motherwell was different. It was a comfortable game. They were very unlikely to be coming back. Against Rangers and against Aberdeen, he wasn't looking to score 5, 6, 7 goals. That was not the behavior of the tactics or the substitutions that were made when they were made. So, and we talked about that earlier in the season too, where he had been somewhat pragmatic in locking down games. So I think it's just something that we're going to have to live with, and hopefully as we get more of these guys back, the rotation and maybe a little bit early substitutions could help alleviate some of it.
Yeah, we do have some data to get to on this, but for us dum-dums out there, James, what's Occam's razor?
The simplest explanation is the most likely.
Okay. I've heard that, but I didn't know it was called that. So again,
that's the
dum-dum here.
That's the 2-second way to explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, Alan, you have data on this. You actually have some numbers to bring to the table when it comes to the Celtic performance. So do you want to walk us through it here?
Yeah, so this is really breaking down when does Celtic concede goals, and what my eye test was telling me that we tended to see a degradation in performance, or at least an uptick in opposition performance around about, well, not even the midpoint of the second half, but before that. And actually, if you look at the data, we're conceding disproportionately with between that 50th minute and 70th minute, that 20-minute spell. So just let me explain this a little bit. The black line is SPFL goals this season and when they occur in 10-minute segments. And as you can see, it's a line which doesn't have too many massive fluctuations and is broadly trending upwards, as you'd expect. More goals are scored the longer a game goes on. And the green line is Celtic, and when they concede between 2014 and this season, beginning of this season, and as you can see, it plots to that SPFL current season pretty consistently. And then the red line is Celtic this season, when Celtic are conceding goals. And you can see that big spike between, around about the 50th minute and then to the 70th minute, and then it falls back again. and then it goes up again in the last 10 minutes. I'll come to that because I do need to provide a bit more context around that sort of uptick towards the end. But it's that spike between the 50th and the 70th minute, and what that says to me is exactly as James says. The fitness, etc. The for different reasons we've not been able to manage that well in the early part of the season, but now we can. Now we do have a bench, and although we talked, and I was quite open about criticising Postecoglou about his choice of substitutions, and I'd go a little bit further than James. I think we can help ourselves here. I think we did then get into a few games where we made very proactive substitutions. Even at Motherwell, we made 2 at half-time. We made another couple on 60 minutes, and we kept it fresh. And we never gave the opponent really a chance to breathe into the game. Even against in the derby, the same. But yesterday, for some reason, despite having a relatively strong bench, we let Aberdeen build an amount of momentum. We conceded 2 goals in that period again, and it was only until the 75th minute that we brought subs on. And then, of course, another trend this season is we saw the game out comfortably. So when we do make the subs, we are seeing the game out. Now, the reason there's a bit of a spike, that red spike towards the last 10 minutes, is because that's normal. Teams do concede a lot of goals in the last 10 minutes, but actually it's mostly in Europe that happened when Celtic were playing this style against far superior opponents. In domestic football, Celtic conceded one goal in the last 20 minutes of games, and that was John Souttar's on the first league game of the season. That's remarkable. So what that tells me, Oscam's razor, what it tells me is if we make our substitutions earlier, we can close the game out earlier. And we can extend that period a little bit more towards the 60th minute maybe, or the 55th minute, right? So I just think we need to recalibrate our substitutions to be a little bit earlier, and we can see these games out with even more comfort. Because again, last night, once we made the subs on 70-odd minutes, 78 minutes, we saw the game out perfectly comfortably. As we did in other games. Plenty of examples of this. So these are 2 very interesting trends. We're letting teams get into it. And by the way, credit to Aberdeen. As much as you've got to criticise Glass for getting it awful way set his team up in the first half, you've got to give him credit that he did do something about it, and he actually put a very effective, even basically matched up. He matched up and just, I think basically it's the old cliche, he told the players to go and win their individual battles. It was that kind of thing. I don't think it was anything particularly clever, but he did it at least, and got to give him credit for that. So, but again, you've got to respond to that. If you see the game not slipping away, but just, this is to say, I keep coming back to Chris Davis, Rodgers were brilliant at this. They saw little turns in the game, like a player who previously had a lot of time on the ball, in which case the fullbacks for Celtic are now getting hounded. They're now getting pressurised. Starfelt, plenty of time on the ball in the first half, now getting hounded, now getting pressurised. What are we going to do about that? Let's sort it before it becomes a problem. Postecoglou's dealing with it after it's become a problem, and if we can just get that bit right, we're going to be some team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it also, what that also says about Celtic's defence is that they're able to see out games quite well in terms of, like last night, for example, when Celtic went 3-2 up, Celtic were comfortable from that point onwards. When they were 3-0 up against Rangers, comfortable again, not giving away chances. They're very good at winning games, essentially. That sounds, it's an overly simple way of doing it. But when Celtic get in the position of power, I think there was a stat on the commentary last night. Can't remember exactly how many minutes it was or how many games it was. But Celtic, if they go ahead, they don't lose essentially this season. That's been the trend so far this season. So that's something that you can get in the habit of doing across the season. League is parked now for the next couple of games.
Sorry, Enda, just on that. So I do, believe it or not, track this. So from a winning position in the league, we've dropped points in 1 game. Okay,
1 game.
And to put that into context, the next lowest would be 3 times. 3 times with three would be the next lowest number of number of games that teams have dropped points from winning positions.
Was that the draw against Dundee United?
I think so. Yeah. And again, I'd mitigate that by saying, the sending off that was missed in the first half. So yeah.
Yeah, well, and that was if I recall correctly, that was a Harks header that was in the first half.
It was almost straight after we scored.
Yeah, and we basically lit them up overall. So, yeah, I mean, if I recall correctly, I mean the chance creation in that game was.
I think there's something, and I can't measure this, and I can't have data for it. But what my eyes tell me is that as much as James is absolutely right, and everything that he says about fatigue and tiredness and the demands of Postecoglou's system is not just demanding on Celtic; it is demanding on the opposition. And once Celtic go ahead again, or like get the third goal or the fourth goal in the second half, the other team has got nothing left. And the evidence is there. One goal in the last 20 minutes of domestic football all season, right? We're running teams off their feet. So use the bench, be ruthless.
Yeah, absolutely. Wraith Rovers this weekend in the cup, and you want Celtic to hammer Wraith Rovers out the door for a number of reasons, mainly off the field issues that the club have finally sorted out. But we won't go too deep into that conversation. The whole sale changes going into this game, or are we going halfway there with 4 or 5 different substitutions? What's our thoughts for this game?
I mean, my bias in this kind of circumstance is you go as far towards wholesale changes as you're comfortable to make, and rotate and give some guys minutes, whether it's Julian or some of these, Soro, guys like that they're going to be fine against that level of competition. Maybe give Bain a game to keep him sharp. Because again, you don't know when injuries are going to happen. So what happens if Carter Vickers, God help us, gets hurt? What happens if Hart gets hurt? So if you can't do it against a lower league team, and not only a lower league team, but a couple of notches down who aren't playing particularly well, when can you do it? So I think I err towards as much as you can stomach would be my maybe a guy like Doak. Mikey Johnson hasn't had any minutes. You know what I mean? Like we've got plenty of guys. Forrest, yeah, Forrest could use some game time probably. And, you're telling me James Forrest can't handle Wraith Rovers, that kind of thing. So Giakoumakis would be, you know what I mean? Like there's plenty of good quality now that we've got some depth that we can give guys, I think, some minutes and be fine.
Last word to you, Alan.
Yeah, I think you look at each player. I think because of the number of injuries that we've had and because of the peculiarities of where we've bought players from, especially Japan, in terms of where they were in their season versus pre-season, you've got to look at each individual and say what is the best option. So, for example, I would definitely play Maeda. I'd put him in. In fact, I'd put Maeda on the left and I'd put Giakoumakis down the middle. I think Giakoumakis needs games. Maeda is essentially. This is a new season for him now. Haitati, again, this is a new season for him. I'd actually play all 3 of those. I'd play Forrest. I'd play Bain because, like exactly as James says, you don't know when he's going to be needed. I would put Julian in if he's fit and ready to play. Put him in with Welsh because again, these guys are going to have to get some minutes in the legs. They may well be needed. And again, Taylor's come back from an injury. He's played some hard 90 minutes. So put Scales in. So yeah, definitely. But it's got to be a strong enough team to win. But I think there's a mixture there, I guess is what I'm saying, between players who are actually a different part of their season, players like Forrest who need minutes and Giakoumakis who need minutes, and then there's some that just maybe you say, okay, you've done a lot of work recently, like Carter Vickers. You can have a rest, but you play to win the game first and foremost as well.
Yeah, I thought you were going to suggest not starting Liam Scales there, and I was going to jump down in your thought, but I won't
start him at striker, Enda. Put him in at top.
Listen, I honestly stick him left wing, and let's see how he gets on. No, hopefully Celtic continue on the fine form and go 21 games unbeaten this week against Wraith Rovers this weekend. Alan, James, thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Have a good week.
Now, my thanks to everyone who watched and commented on the YouTube stream as well. If you're watching us on YouTube, do hit the subscribe button below and keep the comments coming as well. If you want to get the podcast of this, it'll be available on Spotify and iTunes as well, or wherever you get your podcast. And we're on Twitter at Huddle Breakdown. We'll be back again next week with the Bodo Glimt Europa Conference League review. So that'll be exciting stuff. So we'll chat to you then. Good luck.